On the waters of the Pacific, ships cloaked in darkness sailed through, carrying the immense suffering of its prisoners. Almost every corner was infested with pests, making life a living hell for the unfortunate inhabitants. Still, it was minuscule compared to the immense hunger and thirst they felt inside the cabins that had no ventilation. While the sight of their comrades outside gave them a sense of reprieve, it was all but fleeting. The cannons and gunfire from these very ships were all that welcomed them. 21,000 American POWs were killed and injured from friendly fire, but that was beside the ones who perished from diseases, starvation, and exhaustion. These were the horrifying conditions inside the Japanese hell ships of World War II. The term hell ship was first used by American POWs who were imprisoned by the British in their ships. These were no ordinary vessels, though. They were hellish places that held unimaginable suffering. American soldiers who refused to swear allegiance to the British were sardined into these ships during the American Revolutionary War. The unforgiving conditions combined with the physical torture resulted in 11,000 deaths. In the context of World War II, this was not so different. Allied POWs used this term to describe the Japanese ships that kept them imprisoned. The Empire repurposed these merchant vessels to transfer POWs and forced laborers to multiple locations they controlled. It was May 1942 when the Japanese began using these vessels, transferring POWs to territories like Burma, Siam, Moluccas, and Sumatra. Inside, the prisoners experienced a myriad of life-threatening situations such as dehydration, starvation, exhaustion, and disease. These voyages could last for several weeks, and many POWs did not survive the journey. If these people had not perished during the trip already, another hell was waiting for them beyond the ship's unforgiving hull. Many prisoners, already weakened from their harrowing ordeal aboard the hell ships, were forced into backbreaking labor to fuel the Japanese war effort. They were made to work on railways like the infamous Burma Railway, mines, airfields, and other wartime projects. Starved, beaten, and worked to the bone, these POWs faced daily brutality, all while being used as pawns in Japan's war infrastructure. The notorious Death Railway alone claimed the lives of 12,000 Allied prisoners. In these labor camps, mortality rates soared as prisoners were pushed beyond their limits, with little regard for their health or well-being. From 1942 onward, Imperial Japan utilized 134 of these transport vessels as hell ships, making over 156 voyages and transporting around 120,000 Allied POWs. These numbers alone are staggering, but the gravity of the situation becomes even clearer when considering that several of these ships were unknowingly sunk by Allied forces, often resulting in no survivors. The Oryoku Maru, an infamous hell ship, carried over 1,500 POWs from various nationalities. The accounts from its journey are gutting, with some POWs attempting to murder fellow prisoners or even drink their blood due to the intense deprivations they faced. It was sunk by an Allied plane on December 15, 1944. Needless to say, the hell ships lived up to their name. The deplorable conditions inside were absolutely inhumane. Overcrowded spaces devoid of basic amenities, sanitation, or even space to move. Prisoners were packed like sardines, shoulder to shoulder in dimly lit, stifling holds. The constant churning of the ocean waves, combined with the ship's motion, led to a nauseating experience, and many prisoners were left seasick, with vomit and excrement further exacerbating the already unhygienic conditions. Food and water, both vital for survival, were in shockingly short supply. The already weakened state of the prisoners due to prior captivity was compounded by a severe lack of sustenance aboard the hell ships. The meager rations were often just a handful of rice or a sip of water and were insufficient to maintain health or strength. As a result, diseases spread rapidly in such cramped conditions with little to no medical care available. Illnesses like dysentery, malaria, and beriberi, which were already prevalent among the prisoners, became rampant, and those afflicted had no recourse but to suffer. Beyond the tangible horrors of the environment, prisoners were subjected to frequent physical and psychological abuse at the hands of their captors. Beatings, humiliation, and other forms of mistreatment were common, serving both as punishment and as a means of breaking the spirit of the captives. The constant threat of violence combined with the uncertainty of their fate wore heavily on the prisoners' minds, leading many to the brink of despair. The menacing presence of vermin further compounded the prisoners' misery. Fleas, lice, and roaches infested every conceivable corner, turning sleep into a luxury and every waking moment into a test of endurance. These pests weren't only persistent physical irritants, but were vectors for even more diseases, adding another layer to the ship's already lethal environment. The absence of adequate ventilation rendered the atmosphere inside nearly suffocating. Communication and emotional support were stifled as well. Prisoners would sometimes catch glimpses of the ocean outside, only to be cruelly reminded of their confinement. Some would find solace in whispered conversations, sharing memories of home and dreams of freedom. The intense hunger and thirst caused hallucinations, with some prisoners even driven to madness by the torment. The constant hunger pains, combined with the trauma of confinement, it was hell on Earth. The danger wasn't limited to the conditions inside the ships, though. The vessels themselves were often unmarked, making them prime targets for Allied submarines and aircraft unaware of the human cargo on board. When hell ships were attacked or sunk, the already harrowing situation turned even graver. Many prisoners found themselves trapped below decks as water rushed in, while others, even if they managed to escape the sinking ship, often faced gunfire from their captors or the perilous open ocean. While the physical conditions inside the Japanese hell ships were undeniably harrowing, the mental and emotional torment experienced by the prisoners were equally, if not more, excruciating. These ships became theaters of psychological warfare, where the battle was not just against tangible conditions, but against the mind's own demons. Locked away in suffocating darkness, many prisoners grappled with a profound sense of isolation. Stripped of their freedom and autonomy, a debilitating sense of helplessness pervaded their daily existence. The confinement, malnutrition, and constant physical discomfort led to a heightened state of anxiety. Every creak of the ship, every shout from the captors, and every sudden movement became a potential harbinger of more suffering or death. As days turned into weeks, the already low morale became even lower. The mind, in its desperate attempts to cope, sometimes played cruel tricks. Hallucinations of freedom, of rescue, of seeing loved ones again, only for reality to come crashing down with relentless brutality. Though the conditions were insurmountable, there were survivors. These were their stories. Tech Sergeant Richard Henry Peterson of the Army Air Corps recalled a chilling episode of how they were collectively punished. After the escape of a few members from their group, Peterson and 3 of his comrades were subjected to relentless torture. From 8 in the morning until 3 in the afternoon, the Japanese commander alternated between questioning and beating us with a belt and a bamboo stick. Despite the incessant assault, Peterson and his mates staunchly denied any knowledge of the escape. Their resilience, however, came at a grave cost. In a grim turn of events, as the 4 men were returned to their compound, they witnessed their top officers being led away. The ominous sound of gunshots soon followed, signaling the tragic execution of their comrades. The Japanese didn't merely rely on ad hoc punishments, they institutionalized fear. As described by Staff Sergeant Henry Waleto, the former commander of the American Defenders of Bataan and Corregidor, the punishment system was explicitly designed to deter escape attempts. There were 10-man squads, and if one of you escaped, the other 9 would be killed. This macabre strategy meant that individual decisions weren't just personal, but carried life-altering consequences for fellow inmates. The ruthless implementation of this policy was evident in multiple instances. Waleto recounts harrowing incidents where groups of 9 men were brutally beheaded as retribution for a single escapee. Among the multitude of torments that POWs endured, the issue of sustenance, or the lack thereof, was a primary concern. Private Dan Crowley provides a sobering glimpse into the bleak dietary conditions aboard these ships. Crowley's recollection paints a bleak picture of the food that was meted out to the prisoners. The primary dish, a green concoction, was derived from potato plant tops. Not only was it nutritionally inadequate, but its texture was such that it resisted any effort at digestion. You could chew it for months and you couldn't break it down, Crowley remembers. But this wasn't the only horror that the prisoners' food carried. The rice, a staple that could have been a source of some nutrition, was compromised. Filled with silt and infested with worms, it became more of a challenge to consume than a source of sustenance. These were but a few of the horror stories that emerged through the years. The Japanese hell ships were just that, ships that held versions of a person's worst nightmare. We hope